So your custom theme does not overwrite the default theme, or rather it merges with it. Okay, so you can define only the elements of the custom theme that you need to customize, and whatever you customize will be overwritten, and any other values that are in the default theme will still remain. Okay, so it doesn't completely replace the default theme, it merges with the default theme. So right off the bat, you're going to have access to everything from the default theme, and then you can overwrite and customize it to your liking. We can go ahead and do this by first importing, and we'll destructure this out, the create MUI theme from @material-ui/core/styles. Next, we can come under here and we will create a constant of theme equal to create MUI theme, and we'll call that like a function, and then we're going to go ahead and pass it an object. Before we start filling that out, let's come down and make sure we export default the theme constant. We're going to export that theme constant so that our theme provider can actually get access to the object that we're creating. Now, one thing I haven't mentioned yet explicitly is that Material UI uses JSS as the styling solution, or CSS in JS. This essentially means that we'll be working with styles not in a big CSS file, but rather in JavaScript objects, where we define the properties as the styles that we want to apply, and then the values being the value we want that style to have. This is a special object though, not a regular JSS object, because this is where we're actually creating our theme, but it's helpful to know that JSS is where some of these conventions are coming from, such as for the font height, font family, font size. We'll see that those are coming from JSS, from this idea of putting our styles of CSS within our JavaScript. I think this is actually a super powerful solution, and I've really come to love it and the flexibility and power that it enables for some really cool behavior that we'll start to see later on. But being able to have the full power of JavaScript to dynamically apply your styles in different cases and with different properties is really powerful and really convenient. To start off our theme though, I always start with the same few objects. Okay, so within our main theme object here, we'll start with the palette object that we saw from the default theme. Below this, let's go ahead and add, make sure you get the comma right there. We'll add the typography object, and then we'll go ahead and add an overrides. And we won't actually be putting anything into there right now, but this is usually how I start off with my theme. Next, we can go up into the palette, and we can set here 3 different main types of colors. Okay, so the primary color of our application, and this is going to be the main color applied to most of the Material UI components. Okay, so all the default colors and all the default styles that they're going to have is going to pull from this primary color that we set. All right, and inside of the primary color object, we will have the main primary color. All right, and we'll get to that in just a second, of what that color is going to be. But one thing that is really cool about how this is set up is you can only specify the main color. So say we just did some random color here. That's not a valid color, but say this was a valid color. You could then add a property, or you don't have to add any other properties. You can just have to add main, and then you can access an automatically generated light version of that color, as well as a dark version. So later when we access our colors through the theme.palette.primary.main, we could also access it from primary.light, and without even specifying anything, Material UI will automatically generate a lighter version of the color that we specify as our main. So I think that's super cool and really helpful. So I usually just throw in a main color and use the light and dark variants that it generates for you. Next, we'll want to go ahead and add a secondary color. So the secondary color is used for a lot of the accents and more subtle effects throughout our application. But again, these are all going to be applied by default to our components. So we'll want to just make sure we pull the right color from our design file. But we'll see that. And again, you can add just the main color, and then it'll automatically generate light and dark variants. Okay, the other color set I add in the palette are our common colors. Okay, and this will just be for whatever colors you want to throw in, things that you might use throughout your application, like a red or a blue or an orange, or whatever colors you use commonly, you can store them here. So not in the primary and secondary, but any other colors, you can store them in your common section of the palette for easy access. You really want to try and stick to defining your colors in the theme and then accessing them from the theme elsewhere. That way, if you ever want to change a color in your application, it's super easy to do because you can just change the color definition in the theme and see it reflected everywhere that it's used throughout your application. Instead of having to go through and hunt down every instance of a certain color and change it, it provides one convenient centralized location for you to manage your styles. So those will be our main colors in our palette. I'll go ahead and clean that up a little bit. And then let's go into our typography. We always want to have a set of specific font styles that we apply consistently throughout our application to denote hierarchy and importance. So the most important, biggest text is going to be our start at H1, going down to smaller text all the way to H6. Okay, so we'll just go through, find our biggest text, put the styles for that under H1, and then progressively add the H's as we need. Okay, so we'll do some of that. And then we'll also end up having at least one body 1 style. This is all from the default theme. And then there's a body 2 style as well. I think we'll just need a body 1, we'll see. And we'll add a bunch more H's here in just a minute. But it's important to note that these are specifically from the default theme, the H1, H2, all the way down to H6, and then body 1, body 2, subtitle 1, subtitle 2, and a few others. These are all default typography elements in the Material UI theme, and that actually makes them special. Okay, this is going to be really important to note later on, but we can't access customized elements here the same way we can access these elements. So what I mean by that is we could also, it's totally fine for us to go in here and add a typography style and call it whatever we want. We could customize it. So say purple button. So this would be all of the text styles for our purple button, right? So it could be anything that we want. We could make up any custom name here, and then we could go in and put our font family and do whatever other styles that we want for this. But since this is something that we defined ourselves, it is a custom entry in the typography section of the theme, we won't be able to access it from the variant prop on the typography component. Okay, the typography component using the variant prop can only directly access the default values. Okay, so I'll show a different way later for how we can still add all our styles here and then pull them into the component that we need and style that typography from these styles, but we can't use the variant prop to do that, not with the typography component. That only works with the default ones. So that's why we'll be going through and overriding all the defaults that we need so we have easy access. Finally, the overrides, like I've mentioned, is where you can actually add styles that you want to override for specific Material UI components, but globally across your entire application. So a lot of times you'll want to customize certain components for a specific part on the page or application, like changing the color of a button for just one-time use. But if there are components that you consistently everywhere in your application, you want to override the Material UI defaults and make sure that every time you use a button component, it's going to look like this, you can use the override section to do that. Okay, so we'll get more into that later. It's just really important to know that that is possible and that that's available. Let's take a quick break and we'll come back in the next video and actually build out this Material UI theme from our design file.